This podcast has been brought to you by MyCFC, where federal employees and charities join together as a catalyst for community. To listen and learn more about today's topic, please visit mycfc.org. And now, enjoy the show.
Well, thank you for joining us for our first podcast on federal employees' commitment to service. My name is Antonia Gonzalez. I'm the National Director of Events for the McGuire Outreach Coordinator Services, and I'm joined by Mr. Mike May, who's the Executive Director of our McGuire Outreach Services, as well as Jennifer Howard, the National Director of Operations. And our very first public employee, federal employee, public servant, is Mr. Lloyd.Billey, who will be kind of giving us his story and his why around the CFC and why he is so committed to participating in the CFC and volunteering to run the campaign in his area every year. Mike?
Thank you, Antonia. Thank you very much. Jen, thanks for joining us. And today we have the distinct pleasure of talking with one of my favorite federal employees, CFC volunteers, Mr. Lloyd.Billey. Lloyd is the administrative officer this year of the Northern Lights Combined Federal Campaign, their LFCC. Lloyd is a research technician for the USDA Agricultural Research Service Center. But I know Lloyd as the number one Northern Lights CFC volunteer that I've worked with over these past 3 years. So Lloyd, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
So when I wrangled Lloyd into doing this podcast, he wanted to know what the ideas were that we wanted to talk about. And I really just wanted to hear about what his first role was in the Combined Federal Campaign, how he got started fundraising, and would you mind sharing that with us and just talking about what it looked like when you started as a campaign coordinator in the Combined Federal Campaign?
My first role with the CFC was just kind of as a volunteer. I was helping out my colleague who was in charge of it here at our location in the beginning. We used to put on a used book sale where everybody would bring in their old books and we would spread them out in our conference room and have 2 days where people could just come in and browse and buy the new used books. And that turned into a successful event. And then we discovered that by baking homemade cookies each night, we could get more foot traffic in. And when Joyce decided that it was time for her to retire from the campaign, she asked me if I would start serving on the LFCC, and that was back in just after 2000, and I've been there ever since.
So you were born and raised a fundraiser?
I was born and raised in a fundraiser. I have a family that's kind of service is a family tradition. My first experience was I was about 10 years old, and my best friend and I decided we were going to raise some funds for a certain Labor Day telethon, and so we got our can of coffee and emptied it out and cut a hole in the lid and sent out down the street. And we spent the morning knocking on doors and took a break for lunch, and we discovered that we'd done okay, but we weren't setting any records. And back in that day, the telethon had the out in the parking lot where when you came by, you could dump your cans in their big collection jar and maybe get on television and talk to the host. So my dad made the comment at lunch that if we got $100 that he would take Kurt and I, and we would drive the 40 miles to the local television station and we could empty our can into the jug. And so we headed out back after lunch and had a decent pace, but we weren't setting any records. And then about halfway through the afternoon, one individual decided to add a $20 bill to our coffee can, and we just discovered that was the greatest feeling in the world. And we made our goal and we got our trip to Aberdeen. We didn't get on television, but we did make our goal of $100. And so sometimes in fundraising, you have to, all of those quarters that were in that can were just as important as the $20 bill. And I think that's a lesson that I've taken through all my years of the CFC, is that a $5 donation is every bit as important as a $100 donation.
The collective impact we know of federal employees who give, whether it's $1 a pay period, $5 a pay period, over the course of the campaign, over $8.4 billion has been raised by generous employees just like you, Lloyd. And I think it has to be acknowledged that the Northern Lights CFC, where you currently reside and represent as a